All right, and we're live. All right, so right before we jumped in, hi everybody. Right before we jumped in, Sarah asked me the $1,000,000 question, which is, "Am I on Mastodon?" And the answer is not really. um, I had a Mastodon account a long time ago, and I didn't use it then. I doubt I'll use it now. Um, I'm not saying that I'm like pro all the stuff happening or whatever. I'm just very hesitant to move a bunch of stuff over and do a bunch of things because I'm really lazy. And once I do that, who knows what'll happen. But that being said, I do understand there is some like technical funness that comes from that. What about you? How much are you? I don't want to say how much are you tooting. That just sounds terrible. They really got to change the name.
Yeah, I could do without that, but yeah, I've been trying it out mainly because I'm also kind of interested in the protocol behind it. So like all mastodons are federated, so there's not just a singular thing that is Mastodon, but they all communicate with a neat open source protocol called ActivityPub. And
Yep.
so there's lots of interesting tools that people are working on building to kind of like relevant news to that is Tumblr is looking at adding ActivityPub support for, I don't know, what do you do there? Tumble? Reblog?
You Tumblr.
You Tumblog. But if
Unless
they...
you're in Canada, then you Timbits, I guess.
Nice. Timbits are great. Don't diss Timbits. But yeah, the idea is then you could follow a Tumblr account on your Mastodon account, or vice versa, which I think is just an interesting... I don't know if it's good or bad, but I think it's interesting, and I want to try it out.
So Micro.blog was doing a lot of this stuff while preserving like your ownership of everything, which is kind of cool. Like Micro.blog gives you the ability to, like, they can host your blog for you if you don't want, and you can do like micro blogs, which are the 280 character or whatever, like tweets, or you could just do a longer form post and then it'll just link out to that page, which I really like. I like the idea, I like the concept, and I mean I have a Micro.blog. I don't do anything with it, but the way that it's set up is it's just my blog. So when I write something on my blog, it just adds it, and I'm like, oh, that's great. Well, it used to add it until apparently I broke something. I think I changed like my URL or something, who knows. I've been known to do that once or twice, but I like that model. I like the model of like I do one thing and then it just goes everywhere. I know that there's like this, it's almost like there should be a balance between, like, first of all, what is social? Hold on, my camera's like a little tilted. There we go. What is social? And then there's like what is content. And that's the problem that I have, is that, for us, both both are important. Like, I feel like the thing that keeps me off of dev.to, except for like when I'm doing stuff for work, is dev.to is trying to be social and content. Twitter, the social was the content. The medium is the message, which is I don't understand that quote at all, but whatever. And the same thing for Mastodon and all that stuff. Like the overall goal is to have a brand around the things that you're doing, and the primary thing in that brand is text, which, I mean, I want to talk to you about that too, of like the whole, like, I'm really liking the idea of doing like YouTube shorts and stuff like that. And I know that like TikTok is the thing. I'm kind of over TikTok already. Like I want to be able to make a thing, and I feel like TikTok is not great for making it. It's great for consuming it.
I have a confession. I don't have a TikTok.
That's
Nor have
healthy.
I ever looked at a TikTok. Well, I mean, other than things that were like screen capped to Twitter or
Yeah.
Reddit.
Well,
But
that's what I mean is like the best way to view TikToks that you want to watch or want to see are to view them on other mediums, because TikTok, it's so easy to just get consumed with, and then you're like 3 hours later you're like, oh, I wasted all this time. Whereas making a YouTube short is easy. And I guess in the same way, well, not even making a TikTok is as easy, because in order to make a TikTok, you have to first make the video, then you have to put it into your like camera reel on your phone, and then you have to do like all the post editing and modification stuff after that. Then I'm like, that's more work. Where if I'm just posting to YouTube, I'm doing the same thing that I would do with any other video. I'm just making the video and then putting everything there and then hitting publish, and it's done.
yeah. Also,
what's up, Zuba? If the meme doesn't make it all the way to TikTok, from TikTok to Tumblr, it's not worth it. I mean, but that's what this activity pub thing is supposedly going to do, though. Is that what they're saying? Is like you make the thing in one place and then you can just determine where it goes based on how it's connected through ActivityPub?
Yeah, so like each client, so like Mastodon is a client that can interpret ActivityPub. There's like a Flickr knockoff. There's like and it's a protocol, so however they want to interpret it, they can add special featurey things on top of it, so maybe things won't be rendered exactly the same way unless it's accounted for. But yeah, it wouldn't be like a screenshot of a screen recording of someone holding their camera up to their screen that you're watching. Like I do subscribe. I am a Redditor, and so like there's a subreddit that's like TikTok gore or something like that, which is just like the best of TikTok. So that's how I mainly get my TikToks. Yep. But anyway, what do you want to talk about today, Jay? Since I hijacked before we started.
No. This is it. Like, this is the thing. Like, we were talking about this, and I'm kind of glad Zuba's in the chat too, because we were talking about this. Yeah, so we were talking about this thing yesterday, and I last couple of weeks I've been working on kind of the pivot to all of the stuff that I did for my 31 days of ADHD awareness and stuff like that. And I was using, Azure storage queues and all of that. And we got into the conversation about like, okay, yeah, that's great and stuff. How do you scale this out? And, I turned it into, working on turning it into a little like website, Twitter scheduler thing that we can use for, my podcast, Python Community News. And in that, we're also like going through this process of like, all right, making it easier to talk about deploying, from Azure Web Apps to Azure Container Apps and all these other places. So, and in like the other side of the job was, we're talking about doing some content refreshes and stuff on the site. And Anthony casually just mentioned, so if we have all of our documents in a queue, oh, Jay, we could use your, whatever for that. And I was just like, what? So now I'm trying to figure this out, because I feel like there's a design pattern that exists for this, because it keeps popping up in my life where like it's I don't want to say, is it ETL? Is that I can never remember the whole acronym for ETL, but basically you have like, I think about it from like my previous job with Elastic, where we had Logstash, and you basically have input, modification, output. And I know a lot of people were talking about using that for like ETL pipelines, or you have this thing that brings data in, you have this thing that modifies the data, and then you have this other thing that sends it out, and then you're building, basically that service is like the manager of that thing. And that's kind of where I'm looking at this as kind of I'm going to throw out a buzzword here because someone told me about it. When you're telling the story of why you would do this, or what services already do this or do things like this, it to me is okay. I have a bunch of inputs, and I want to talk about all of them, and I don't want to have to manually work with them. I want to just make the thing and have it go wherever they're going to go, and this seems like, especially right now where everything is all up in the air about where the greater community is going to move to, this seems like a great idea. This is like the right time to talk about this, because right now everything we've built is for Twitter, but there is an ActivityPub API, there is a LinkedIn API, which I really want to play with, because I don't know what it is. LinkedIn, I'm like, as I've gotten older, I'm like, okay, I gotta get it. But just this idea that like we could use it for so many different things, and like we don't necessarily have to define what those things are, but basically what I'm thinking about doing is basically building a wrapper around Azure storage queues that just handle very basic CRUD operations that aren't necessarily handled by the SDK already. So like, how do I cycle the queue to a specific ID? How do I delete a message that's in the middle of the queue? How do I, and again, a lot of this is like, it's trying to keep it simple enough that it's still not, you should just get a database for this, but also something that 90% of the time you're not interacting with it. But in the moments when you do need to interact with it, it's kind of a nice experience.
So, question. Which is the right repo? Should we put some links to repos for what you're talking about here?
Yeah.
Hey, homie coder.
That's a good question. What is the right repo?
Or I can't remember if you had a good... If you had a good blog post with like a visual, like showing the architecture you're talking about.
So yeah, there is a blog post. I love how I slandered dev.to, and now I'm immediately going to dev.to.
Dev.to.
Pull up that. And I mean, this isn't even the best one for it, honestly. I'll throw that in the chat. I forgot it won't let me actually throw the links in there, but like that kind of talks about why I built the thing. And then there is a GitHub repo that is like, this is the thing that I'm building, kind of. Yeah. The challenge is all of this is still kind of predicated, like it's still in the phase of you're building the thing for Twitter, not for everything else. And also my readmes and like community standards and stuff might not be great. Oh no, I mean, they're okay, I guess. They're like midway there. But it's like, this is all manually add stuff to the queue and then eventually set up something to automate tweeting it out. And what I'm thinking of is taking the work that we started with on AZQ Tweeter and adding to that, but taking the tweeter part of it out and doing like AZQ Manager, and then having something like Pluggy, which don't know how familiar you are with Pluggy.
I know I have to try 3 times with my USB plugs. Is that Pluggy?
Something like that, actually. No. So Pluggy is... So do you know how like PyTest allows you to have like all these different plugins that work with it? So like you could do like PyTest Talks or PyTest Mock and all this other stuff. The way that was built out was there was like this plugin architecture style called like, it's called Pluggy because it's like, oh, you build your thing and then you have this plugin system where Pluggy is like the plugin manager, and then people can develop plugins for whatever you're doing. And in my mind, that's why I'm saying I feel like there's a design pattern for this, because I know that there are already modules that do this. So if it's like, all right, I just have to create the hooks, and this is something that I'm doing for my static site generator as well, but we're manually building the plugin architecture because of the, I don't want to say complexity, but because of the how how Render Engine is designed is everything is class based. So in most cases, you don't need to have all of this external logic. You just need to have like a pre-configured class. So it doesn't make sense to be like, oh, hey, we have this whole plugin system for you to make sure you have endpoints and hooks for, just to create this inherited class. But yeah, like this idea of using something like Pluggy, I could say you have the queue management side, and then you have this other piece that is just operating with the queue. And you could then say, I want to have my one input and these 15 outputs, or these 7 outputs. And Pamela, our for folks on the stream, our colleague, did this really cool idea of like a message transformer, so that you can store JSON in the queue, and then you can run functions on it. And that's where I'm kind of like, that's the plugin architecture that I'm looking at. Is like, all right, let's throw that in somewhere so that it makes more sense. Oh, what's up?
I'm just doing this so I don't forget. Do you want to, while you're talking about this, can we like put up like a sketch pad or something to like draw out the architecture that we're talking about?
Do you have a sketch pad you can draw
I have PowerPoint open. I'm happy to share it if you want.
You
but
do the PowerPoint thing. Yeah, roll with it.
I'm just trying to I want to visualize it and draw it out so that it's easier to then assign okay, we want Pluggy to go in between here.
Can I share
or like a whiteboard?
An iPad. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Also, your share screen. Can I share a thing that's plugged in? Probably not.
Yeah, Zuba, we only have to try twice now.
I saw that. I was trying to see if I could share my iPad, but it's not showing up.
Someone suggested, yes, we are computering. Yeah, do you know that one?
No, but we're gonna learn about it.
All right.
The eternal loop. Okay.
Infinity.
I do know of Excalidraw. I just don't know anything about it.
I have used the Microsoft Whiteboard stuff a few times. Actually from a remote Surface Go, but I do not have my Surface Go with me.
Yeah. Can you see this? You see the...
I can see that. That's perfect.
Okay. I'm guessing everybody else can see it then. I'm just gonna do this then. Yeah, that works. Can I... Oh, yeah, I can do that. There we go. Sweet.
Nice.
All right.
This is great.
If all of this is... We're just gonna say AZQ manager. I can't spell. Manager. There we go. So then you have... I can't read chat, so...
Oh, that's okay. Kojal Drizza said, I keep hearing people talk about CodeSpaces, but I don't think I've ever used it. Well, today is a great day to try.
Oh, yeah.
I feel
we are definitely going to cover CodeSpaces. That's I mean, you can't show it off because you don't have any more minutes, but
oh no,
we could definitely
I probably do, but I'm working on getting our corporate policies set up. But yeah, no, the TLDR is CodeSpaces is directly from GitHub. You can spin up basically a containerized environment that you can pre-configure for a repo so that anyone else who walks up can basically in one, possibly 2 clicks in the browser start editing and working on the project. So And there is a free allotment of hours, as Jay was talking about, per month. So yeah, for contributing to open source projects or trying to get contributors to new projects. It's kind of like if you do stuff with Python and Jupyter Notebooks, it's kind of like Binder or Colab. And in fact, you can also set up CodeSpaces to, by default, it launches with a VS Code interface, which is awesome because anything you have set up, like for your local VS Code, if you have settings sync, it goes there. Else you can launch it as a Jupyter Lab interface. But Zuba says, yeah, I think of it more as a virtual machine, but the remote connection is through VS Code, not through SSH or remote desktop. Yeah, that's much shorter and much clearer. Thanks. Anyway, back
he gets
to
paid the big bucks to know that stuff. All right. So
well, virtual machine sounds scary, I think. And so like, I mean, I know that's what it is, but sometimes people are like, ooh, I don't know what that is. But I like are totally okay with like Binder or Colab or whatever. Okay, so we have our queue manager now.
So this would be the idea of some form of queue. Can I group these? I'm just having fun playing with this tool. Like, oh, new toy to play with. Oh yeah, here we go. So now it works with most things. All right, cool. All right, so the whole queue manager, again, input, transform, output. Again, if you're interested in a tool that already does something like this, but you still have to configure it all yourself, Logstash is a good example of this. Or, I mean, again, coming from a previous company I used to work with, and I know something about it at least. So the input is just how do I get things into the storage queue, and that's easy because that can be something like, you know, GitHub Actions. It could be manual input. It can be
like a
RSS.
Web app.
Yeah, manual input, you know, would be that. So like you could, however you want to set the input actions up, because in my mind, this would usually just be accessible via API.
Got it. So it's just like a REST API you hit.
Yeah, and that's why building the site kind of made sense, because it was like, all right, I could just build a REST API that handles inputting things into the queue, and then point GitHub Actions, point Logic
Local
apps
scripts,
or whatever to do those things. That way you're not having to sit there and like, if you don't want to live completely in like Azure, you don't have to, like, and that's by design. Like, I love Azure functions. I don't want to write them all day for like all the things. And also like Logic apps and things like that are good, but sometimes it's easier to just say REST API post, here's my key, and then this other thing, which then you get questions about APIM and all that stuff. So basically you have some JSON bits, you put them in your input, then you need to do something with those JSON bits. Like when we were talking about doing like a post report card or report tool, that this would be where that exists. So like,
got it.
You know, check all the links and verify Python version.
Generate other graphical assets.
What's that?
Like generate new graphics or something, because this is the stage where you were actually generating the cards for the tweeter, right?
Yeah. So this is where I was creating a thing, but I don't think that necessarily has to be the case for this. I mean, it can be, but I don't think it has to be. Like,
just trying to think of examples of. Sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you could so like this is just saying whatever data I have, just do something, and then give me some form of output. So whatever happens here is going to go to here, and then that's what this is. And like in our example, that would be that like some HTML report, some PDF report or whatever. It could be an email. It could be, some GitHub it could be like GitHub action output or whatever. But it's just like, if we have, and the thing I like about this is if you have this input, that doesn't mean just one queue. So you could have, grab the thing. There we go. You could have this, like if we're talking about our blog post, responsibilities, you could have Jay, Sarah.
It's like Anthony's got to write stuff too.
Exactly. So then, you have those blog posts. I'm just gonna. So you have this blog post 1, blog post, blog post, blog post. And the thing is, we don't necessarily need to know about this stuff until we get to the output. So oh, hey, these posts are getting assigned based on queue length. It already does the transform and then emails us a report on the output of it.
Got it. So just to make sure I understand, the idea is like you have this huge pool of content that you need to review, update, whatever. It goes through the pipeline on the left, and then at the transform stage, it kind of like knows how many have been assigned to whoever, and then decides at the output phase who to send the report to.
I think
what you're thinking?
Possibly. I was thinking more of these are all inputs. So maybe you have a multi-queue thing or whatever. It's like, who's next in the queue? Send it to Jay, send it to Sarah, send it to Pamela, and then you just keep going. And that way it's balanced. It's just constantly going out. And that way we don't have to manually have this, like, oh, this week we're talking about this blog post. If the goal is to do X number of these a month, you just add all of the blog posts in. And they could be auto-added. Like, you could do some type of, we're talking about RSS. You could say, give me all the entries for Microsoft Learn modules that meet this criteria. Or
can you, like, query an RSS feed? Or is that just for when new things are added?
It could be both. It could be once a new item is added, or you could just, again, this is why I like that you can have, manual input to, prime the well, and then have something like RSS to keep adding new things.
Got it. Do you need something so if there's an RSS feed and a REST endpoint, how would you connect those two together?
That would have to be something outside of this. But it could be something like, I know Anthony built that thing with Logic Apps that looked at RSS and then added it to a database. So it could be something like that, where it looks at RSS whenever there's whenever there's something new in RSS, it just adds the input there, and then that pipeline starts running and churning. And again, it's like, at that point, all of this, we don't need to know about any of this. But once this transform happens, and then we get the message, that message could be an email, it could be a message in Teams, it could be something in Discord. Pamela was talking about that yesterday when I was kind of telling her about this idea of, we have things like Stack Overflow that, there's a question that comes into Stack Overflow, and then we need to figure out who the person is to tell about it. And it's like, that could be a Discord bot. So your input is, something that goes in, it does a transform to determine who it needs to go to. So yeah, actually, I like your thought earlier about where does this live. I was saying it lives up in the top area. That was dumb. I was saying it lived up here. It could actually live in here. And you could say this is just a random queue. I'm going to use this transform to determine who this information needs to go to, but I'm also going to check all the links, verify, and do all this, and like give that person your, the report card.
It's the logic for everything.
Yeah.
But in easily programmable Python.
Yeah. Because and that was kind of I was talking to someone about this yesterday, and we were kind of going on like the nice thing about this is it tells the story about a couple of things. One, why would you build this? And then two, when would you not build this? Like, right. This is an ETL pipeline. If you're dealing with 1,800 records a minute, you probably don't want to use this. You want to use some type of service that does things like preserve state and have logging and all these other things, so that if things break, you can just fix them really, you have a little bit more troubleshooting steps. But not everybody needs an ETL pipeline. Not everybody needs, services that are going to cost thousands of dollars to keep up and maintain. The thing I like about this is that this is cheap. It's harder to set up, but my Azure Functions campaign was 6 cents.
Really? For the whole month?
Which is like dirt cheap for the whole month. And and we talk about that of like, if my web app costs me $30, like 28 of those dollars are for the database. So if you take all that out, you're just like, oh, this is a really inexpensive way to do some basic ETL work. But then also here's where you just need to go and spend that money, eventually.
Yeah. Like, in some sense, maybe that's
what I'm thinking.
Oh, that makes sense. I like it. And this helps, I don't know, maybe it helps someone else, but keeping all of the words and stuff in my head. Thank you for drawing pictures. Sweet. Yeah. So what parts...
I think this will become a regular thing now. Oh, no, go ahead.
So what's next? Which parts of these, so I think you have one, your tweeter goes through the input, transform, and output, but with maybe specific things baked into certain parts as it was for a demo, yes? Mm-hmm. So we need to generalize some of those.
I just call it AZQT because it's... Yeah, so if we just need the input and the transform of these, and the transform is just a lambda, that's why I thought it was pretty unique, because it was like, hey, here's this lambda that if you don't provide anything, it does a very basic thing. I think it needs to be a little bit more basic, and this is where I'm trying to figure out what that design pattern is, and I need to buy a book on design patterns or something. Maybe it's in Fluent Python or something. I need to ask Luciano. Maybe he'll know of something.
The Four Horsemen one.
But once I know what that design pattern is, it's a lot easier, because then it's like, all right, build the input, build the transform, and then use Pluggy to handle all the output stuff. And then that way, if people want to donate outputs, they can. And the nice thing about this is the way that it's pitched is the dirt cheap way to build a personal ETL pipeline.
No, and I mean, I think I don't know. I'm quite interested in it because now since I am trying out a lot of the other social and or content platforms other than Twitter, because that was pretty much all I was using before. Having something, which was already a problem because I had a bunch of different Twitter accounts for different projects and stuff I was running. So it's about 8 times I started a CLI tool for doing Python scripts and tweeting from there. But as you were talking about earlier, I can have 20 things that are only half working. And I get about as much done. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the nice part about this is this is something that can be a base for those 20 things that don't work or that only half work. And if you know that part works, then now you only have it, 3/4 working.
Nice. Yeah. So if this isn't a Zeno's arrow argument, I guess something would probably never be completely working. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a job.
So let's talk about CodeSpaces, because I'm interested in I'm interested in hearing you talk about CodeSpaces, because I get it, but I also feel like it's like the same feeling when people start talking about Docker, and I'm like, but do I need that though? And I still I can get where the answer is yes, but I still feel like in most cases the answer is still no.
I mean, which is fair. I mean, I always say use whatever tools work for you. So whatever editor, whatever workflows work, do that. There isn't a one best way. I think it's interesting how perceptions, I think, are slightly different based on your operating system. Because so I am the only one on my team who uses Windows. I like gaming.
That's not entirely true. I mean, Anthony has a PC.
Yes, but we're talking about daily driver.
We just don't. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, technical accuracy. I'm here for that. I'm currently on a Windows machine. I am looking at a Windows window. But yeah, like there are often tools that I will run into that for Python or for other sort of development things that are not well tested on Windows, and which is makes sense. I mean, containerizing Windows, like there are Windows Docker images and stuff, but especially for open source projects, there's not as much. I mean, the value add for those resources probably, or that testing doesn't necessarily feel like it makes sense. If you look at PyPy downloads, though, it totally does, because it's usually about 50-50 for most projects. But I digress. I think CodeSpaces fills a really helpful gap, which is doing one being drive-bys on projects. Like, I'm looking at an open source project, there's like something quick and easy that could be fixed. It's like, if I wanted to do that, I would have to fork and locally clone and set up and whatnot. If the project has a code space set up for it, or has a dev container set up, so CodeSpace is like the service to run the VM. It is configured by dev containers, which is an open source specification. Let me put it in chat here, because it is. So it's used by VS Code and a couple other tools. I think it's just dev containers.
Yeah, because my question was going to be, so it's dev containers, but in a cloud environment.
Yes.
Whereas a dev container would still require you to add the repo and stuff to your local machine.
Can you post that in chat, since I can't post to the unified chat?
Oh, you can't post?
Nope. You are in the driver's seat. So yeah, there's a bunch of different tools kind of developing this open spec, and yeah, it's a win-win, because if you set it up for CodeSpaces, it also works for local development if you're using Docker and whatnot. But yeah, I think I just so many times have, especially with Python, so many environments everywhere, so many different package, not just like pipenv, but there's pipenv, venv, the global, conda, what's on path, who's on first.
Wait,
I hate it.
Who's on first? What? I was like, that one wins.
I don't know, like what's on the path always sounds like it's the setup for a who's on first joke to me, so.
What's on path? Hold on, what is what's on path? This is
well, just like, what executables are on your path can be
I was
found.
like, I was like, you're naming ones that I don't know.
Sorry, no. Just like,
It's like,
what can your tools find from the command line, you know? But anyway,
I want to clip that for a short. That's another topic to talk about.
nice.
All the different versions, pipim, virtually env, what's on path, who's on first, like.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, yeah. So I basically have just gotten in the habit. The only way I can trust, the right Python or the right env is being used is if it's just in its own very fresh container. So whether that be a Docker container that's configured by a dev container or in a code space or something like that, I just need full asterisk isolation. That the cost, of course, is resources. So like, this is great. I can have a bajillion Docker images, and because I have like 128 gig RAM and a bajillion terabytes of local storage and some beefy GPUs here, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case for a lot of people. So if you are trying to do this containerized development locally, it doesn't scale very well. And so having a cloud-based service with free credits that you can do that with, I think, lessens that burden.
Also, let's be honest, if you're using something like dev containers and it's building Docker images on your machine, like, one, that means you have to have Docker installed, but then it also means that you now have the leech that is Docker installed, so all of your resources will eventually disappear.
You can set limits on that.
Yeah,
go to
and then
the
the Docker
Docker
containers don't work right.
Well, then clean up your Docker containers.
My introduction to Kubernetes was, I was at KubeCon and I was trying to figure out why I couldn't get Minikube up and running, and it was legitimately not because of anything Kubernetes or Minikube was doing. It was because I didn't give enough resources to Docker.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there. I mean, it took us like 2 days, and I'm like sitting there with a bunch of people who are like cloud native, like members, like they do all the cloud native stuff. I was just the advocate on staff. I was there to talk to people and like smile and learn about user use cases and things. And meanwhile, I was like, I want to know what I'm talking about, so like, let me try to set up Minikube. And then all of us were just sitting there like, did you try this, did you try this, did you try this, did you try this? And then literally like halfway through day 2, I was like, you know what, it's going to brick my computer, but let's just give it all the resources in the world and see what happens. and worked.
See, if you had a code space, you can set up port forwarding. You can use, there's different hardware backends you can choose. Even with the free tier, it just kind of like costs more credits to use the beefier machines. But there's like 4-core, 8-core machines. There's GPU backed machines. It's available as well. So like, say you have a build that takes like 18 hours. I know some open source projects, like building Rust, I think takes a long, like with all the tests and stuff. One really fun fact about Rust, really quick. They have a cool testing infrastructure. I think it's called Crater, but the idea is when a new core Rust feature is added, it does random samplings of all the crates in the ecosystem and runs those tests with that crate. It's a cool way, like,
out of my head now.
I know.
Like, it literally punches a hole into your system.
Well, at random. But anyway,
locations. It's the Chaos Gorilla, but for your local machine.
But as you might expect, a lot of those tests can take a long time. So like, if you need to, for targeted iterations, you just don't want to wait a day.
Yeah.
You can get it done quick.
And the interesting thing with this too is, I was talking to Pamela about this, and we mentioned, instead of using something like Tox, using something like GitHub Actions for testing, and people were concerned about, okay, but that'll burn through my GitHub action minutes that I get.
Mm.
And this is where a thing like, okay, if you don't have the resources or you don't want to run it locally, you don't want to set up like talks on your environment and do those things there, because that means you have to have all those versions of Python and everything else installed, and then that gets confusing in package management hell and all that stuff. And you don't want to burn through all of your GitHub action minutes. If you're on the free tier, you only have so many minutes. This is an example where, okay, then the solution may be to run talks inside of a code space, to where now you don't have to have all those things installed. And I mean, talks is a beefy environment, but you could at least say, like, if you want to test your stuff, but you don't want to add all this complexity to your machine, just load it up in a code space. It will install everything for you, and then you're good to go.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. And some of the fun, either existing or upcoming features are like, you can spin up a code space on a PR. So let's say you're a maintainer, you're just trying to help someone with a PR. Mm-hmm. You can open a code space in exactly the situation that PR is currently in.
Oh.
I don't know why I'm trying to draw it like this. And then you can work on debugging right from there. And you can then commit to things directly to the PR, if you have whatever permissions to, just right there. And then you don't have to, again, if you're working on something locally, maybe you don't have to like stash, check out, blah, blah, blah. You can just do that. Also, I like sound effects. What can I say?
Stash, check out, blah, blah, blah.
Insert Git actions here. Can you put those? Can you do a voiceover at the end,
for
Jay?
someone that doesn't love Git, you sure?
I like Git. I like Git. Don't make me the villain here. Now I forget what I was. There's other related news about that that I'm not going to get sidetracked on. Shit. Oh, the other is you will be able to attach a code space. God damn it. You will be able to add a code space to an issue report. So, like, if you want to, it's kind of like the holy grail of reproducibility, right? Like, you can fill out all of my operating system, all the version-y boys, like, I was standing on my head with one foot up in the air. Sometimes that may even not be possible for somebody to reproduce. And granted, code spaces are Linux only, so okay, if you have a Windows bug, that doesn't help. But point being, you can get the project, you can make fixing the issue perhaps a little bit easier. So, yeah.
I mentioned that scares me a little bit, and here's why. I've been reading in today's book club. I've been reading.
I know that picture.
Working in Public. It is it's not gonna focus. Okay. Working in Public by Nadia Egbal, and one of the things that she talks about in the book is how the culture around GitHub fundamentally changed how open source work is done. And depending on who you are, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, it makes it more accessible. It makes it so that more people can contribute and get involved and do all those things. The other side of that is that it has made it harder for throw that up there. It's made it harder for the maintainers to be able to manage a lot of drive-by contributors and their contributions. And now what we're saying is, oh, that's fine. Now you can just create an instance of whatever, a drive-by contributor has created and work on it. And to me, that's kind of going in the opposite direction of what I would like to see. I would like to see it kind of the other way around, where it's like, we're going to make it even easier for you to contribute by giving you an environment in that you can do all the things in. And before, you submit your PR, let something like GitHub Actions or let something like pre-commit run those tests, validate that information, ensure that you've done all the things that you're supposed to do before. That way the maintainer of the project can know that if someone submits a PR, all the things have been done. And I feel like CodeSpaces can do that, but like you said, with the limitation of things are only it's only available on like Linux builds and things like that. Like I feel like there's still some issues with that, and that's where I'm like, I would love to see this used as a way to make contributing to open source easier. And my assumption is that is what, you know, the team at GitHub created, you know, built this for. But I would hate to push the narrative of like, okay, now we've made it easier for contributors, but significantly harder for maintainers.
No, I think that's a very good counterpoint / balance point. Because yeah, like having done a lot of like entry level workshops and stuff, like I swear the majority of every time of every workshop is getting something set up on somebody's machine, because there's always some edge case. So like being able to do this for a demo and like, you know, there are other uses too that I think make using it helpful. But yeah, I think a lot of thought should continue to be put into how do you help maintainers. And so one way I think that they're working towards is making it so that the dev container environment and the GitHub Action Runner environment, that you can specify those in one place and like not in the cryptic. It's not cryptic, but sometimes it's not entirely clear what the environment for the action, the thing running the action is. So if you have more control, and then like literally running the tests in the code spaces is the same as running the tests in a GitHub Action pipeline, and you don't have to keep spamming the PR to keep running the tests. But yeah, I think it's true. Making things easier for contributors then does not necessarily, but often come at the cost of maintainer brain health.
Yeah, I don't think it's one or the other. Like it can be both, but I think that in some ways it's our job to make sure that we're telling the right story. And it might even be telling the right story to the right audience. Like it may be like, if both of these are a thing, then how do we tell contributors, okay, you know, hopefully this will be another, I don't want to say another community standard, because everyone knows I love my community standards, but like we've talked about this where like popular projects could and hopefully should have dev containers included. Having those dev containers means that code spaces become available, and it makes it easier for people to, it makes it more inviting for people to start contributing. But I also think that instead of telling the maintainers that, like, you tell the people who want to contribute that, you tell the maintainers, by setting this up, you can put all the pieces in place to make sure that folks are equipped with all the tools necessary to properly test and compile. And I think that we would benefit, and maybe this is a content thing that we can talk about, of what goes into a good code space. Because this is a conversation that I think came up in one of our team's channels of like, oh, dev containers, they're great. And then I was like, yeah, but the ones that I've used kind of don't do anything but give me like all of the packages that I need installed. And they're like, oh, well, that's just not that's an example of a bad dev container. And it's like, okay, but where are the examples of good ones? And I think that if we can show those things, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And to that end, I have a branch / fork on NumPy, so NumPy will have a dev container shortly, and therefore CodeSpace is set up, and they've got a sprint at PyData Global in a week. I also have a workshop there if you want to learn more about Jupyter Notebooks and VS Code. But yeah, hopefully the NumPy Sprint there everyone will have the ability to use CodeSpaces for that. So that is given I get my work done today. Tomorrow. So
yeah.
Cool.
So let's take the last 5 minutes or so, wrap this up, and talk about the thing that I was talking about before, and that's like this idea of shorts as content. We talked about it a little bit earlier, of just like the difference in making it and things like that. But I want your opinion on what would make for good, bad, or what would make for like good shortable content. I need some ideas. We're farming for content here. What would be good shorts for us, especially since some of the things that we talk about often require a lot of context. A lot of it depends. I feel like your immediate, like, it should not be a short is you can't say, like, if you say it depends, like, it can't be a short immediately. But like setting up, would setting up a good code space for Python development be a good short? Here's an example of how I set up my code spaces to be a good short, which also I think that could just be a good GitHub template in general. Which that's a request that I wish, I don't know how this would work. Yes. You're muted, I think. Yeah.
Of course I was. I was going to go check my 3D printer, but no, so they already exist. You can, if you're using VS Code, you can create a dev container template. There's lots and lots of ones available, all kinds of different Python ones, Anaconda, Python plus Node stuff, databases. And there's also a concept of features, so you can take a container and then just in one line in the JSON, say I would also like Rust installed, and it will add that without you having to edit a Docker file.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things that I was thinking of was, so GitHub added these blocks, like the README block things that you have access to and I don't, which makes me jealous. But I would love to see something like that for templates, to where you could have template blocks that are just, okay, here's, and Homie Coder, yes, like Homie Coder and I and someone else are working on a project kind of similar, where like a VS Code extension that would do this, but making it so that you could use, when you create a new repo, you say, I want this block, this block, this block, this block, and this block. And, it adds your code of conduct, it adds your README, or your README like scaffolding, it adds your dev container, your base dev container, and things like that. Right now, I feel like it's all or nothing. Like, you have to have like, this is my exact project, or this is my exact template. Where I think there needs to be something kind of in between. And I think with them adding the README blocks, I feel like I want that, but I want that for code.
Yeah. So the thing that Jay just put in chat is, I think, pretty close to what you're looking for. I think generally it's been more on the code side, but I could see doing stuff for like code of conduct and other like maintenance files. But the idea is basically you have a dev container and you can basically specify components for it, or they call it features. There's a list of, and it's all like open source community added ones right now. And when you go to make a dev container in VS Code, it actually gives you this whole list, and you can pick these like multi-select as you're building the dev container through the VS Code GUI. It's a JSON file, like the dev container spec is just a JSON file, so you can obviously add these yourself by just using the name. But yeah, they kind of act like partial Docker pieces that you can add together Lego block style.
Okay.
So if you want, the Azure CLI, you can add the Azure CLI this way.
I'm just looking at like, oh, the Python dev container Oryx build with .NET 6. I'm like, what?
Yes, I think I have no idea. Maybe that did some like, oh, we just got raided. Lol.
Oh, what's up? Finite Singularity.
Hey, everybody.
I'm guessing, thank you for the raid. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Y'all caught us at the wrap up of the show. We're gonna. I guess we can. If Sarah has time, we can stick around. We can keep the conversation going about these dev containers. Like I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for the raid. Thank you for hanging out with us. By the way, this is a thing that we do weekly. Sarah and I are colleagues. We are on the cloud developer advocacy team at Microsoft for Python, and we are often sharing these resources and the things that we're thinking about or wanting to build. And oftentimes they're silly, they're magical, which is the exact kind of stuff that we like to do. And we need to justify all of our goofiness, which we do by saying, don't worry, it's for work, with a very audible wink involved. So yeah, now that you're caught up, we were just talking about dev containers. I'm a little less bullish on them now, I guess. I think that they're a good idea. I'm glad that a lot of people have them for free now. Like everybody can use them for free up to, was it 60 minutes?
Well, so CodeSpaces has the credits. Dev containers can be used.
Dev containers can be used, period.
It's just a spec.
It's
what you can
Docker,
use with...
You need other things, but if you have the resources, you can do it. Can we build software that can No. No, we can't. I don't know. But... yeah, if you don't want to have all those resources added, directly to your machine, you can use CodeSpaces, and people have the ability to use those for free, which is great. I'm liking the idea. Like I said, I think that telling the story around the idea is interesting. I would love to maybe workshop an idea of like, hey, how do we wind up going and setting up all of the, like, how do we set up our dev containers? I would love to do a video on that and maybe kind of walk through what each one does. And then maybe a short for that would be, here's just the list itself.
Do you want to open VS Code right now?
My VS Code or your VS Code? My VS Code has ACA garbage in it right now.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm going to open a new... because I think it's a lot easier than you think.
Okay.
We can obviously make some content too, but I will...
I need to check out this Mona Sans font too. I want to...
Mona Sans?
Mona Sans, it's the GitHub font that they open sourced. Yeah.
A new window, please.
I just saw it on the front. Hold on, Mona Sans.
Yeah, that was one of the announcements from GitHub Universe. I guess it'd be week before last now.
Yep.
Let's bigify. And I will...
While you're doing that, I hope,
screen. Yeah.
Finite Singularity, I hope you had a good stream. I know that you're
What were y'all working on?
Yeah, I was going to say, Finite's usually working on, like, is it like game development? Is that what you're doing these days? Or no, I forget now. It's like, sometimes you're doing, like, banking stuff and you're doing game stuff. And it's doing all the
government contracts.
Why do we need another font when we have Comic Mono? Okay, so... Comic Mono, very much a great font. Very great for presentations, because a lot of people joke about Comic Sans, but Comic Sans is very readable and discernible for people with dyslexia. So if you want, this is your, Jay's accessibility tip of the day. Use Comic Mono as a code font when you're presenting, because it will allow the majority of people, including those with things like dyslexia, to be able to clearly discern what you're showing on screen. That said, Sarah, what you got?
I'm offering to present. Oh, okay, you got me now.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I have just opened a new VS Code window, open new window, and I have opened a folder that is entirely empty. I believe by default here I have, so the two extensions you're going to want for dev containers, there's one for dev containers, so, but I think it's called remote development. There we go. Because it's actually a group of a bunch of different extensions. Yeah, so it allows you to connect to WSL if you're on Windows. So this is basically all the VS Code infrastructure to work with Docker, as well as connect to an SSH machine, and I think that's it. So when you install this, that adds a little buttony boy down here, bottom left, that allows you, that kind of just shows you all of your, I don't want to run it on my machine, so where should I put it? So here, I'm in a brand new folder. I'm going to scroll down, and I would like to add dev container configuration files. If you want to try a sample with I think it even has sample code in it, you can do it from here. But I'm just going to say, I know what I want, I'm going to configure it. So this is a bunch of baseline ones to start from. So there's Anaconda with Postgres, there's a bajillion in here. I think I usually go with just one of the, for Python stuff, one of the Anaconda ones. I don't usually use Postgres, so that's fine. But now I can go through, and this is basically that list of features we were looking at before. So I can say, hey, I would maybe I want to do some testing. I'll add the AWS CLI. I will add my mouse clicking is being weird. I'll add some bicep support, maybe. I want black for Python.
I have so many questions. These are adding the components for those things. So if you do bicep, it's going to install the Azure CLI with also the bicep stuff, or is it going to give you the bicep VS Code extension? Is it going to give you some of those things, all of those things?
As far as I know, these only add things to the dev container description. So that's not going to change anything about your VS Code extensions or anything in the UI. This is basically shorthand for building up a Docker container. So when it says here, it will add Homebrew, it downloads and installs, it sets up the tool. So if it's more than just a install, it will also connect ports and do port forwarding. So if you go with a dev container that has a database, it will also set up everything so that the database connections and stuff are properly forwarded out of the dev container. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch more now. I don't. You can also set up GPU support and stuff.
Yeah, because when I see Oryx, I'm like, why are we including Oryx in this?
I mean, it's really whatever, maybe I want pipenv and poetry installed too.
You don't want both of those installed. That's a nightmare. Who's on first?
Ha 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 ha, only joking.
Who's on first?
Obviously so the thing with the pre-config that I picked at the beginning, you're just gonna troll me with that forever. Make a Franken container. Of course, some of these things, if I choose absolutely dumb things to put together, it may not work. I don't think it's a guarantee that these will all work in exactly the way I want, but whatever. Okay, so I've picked some stuff. I will hit OK, and it just adds the dev container files. So if I go here, what that does is it adds, everything is always in this .dev container directory, and the specification itself is a JSON file here. And so you can see it says, okay, this is an Anaconda dev container. The actual Docker container, the actual Docker file is created for us. And you can see it is very simple. It is just a pre-built, you can go look at what's in this, but it's basically just, I think, Ubuntu Linux with Anaconda installed. And what's really nice about this is if you have a Docker fire, yes, if you have an environment.yaml file in your Python project, this will automatically set up that environment when you spin up the dev container. So I like that this basically just installs it as it builds it. But yeah. Other than that, like we can see our features listed here. And then if you do want to add things about like customizing the VS Code front end, like you want to have certain extensions installed, there is a way to do that in here. I think it is.
Yeah.
Hang on.
I think I've seen something.
I think it's under customizations. It should have autocomplete here. So if I do VS Code and I say I want
extensions.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Copilot. Yeah, so if I want the Python extension installed by default, oops, and I actually get it to have the right syntax. Now, when somebody spins up this dev container in VS Code, if they're not using VS Code, it won't work. This also works in CodeSpaces because it's VS Code. But yeah, then this file, oh, theme font check. This is Witch Hazel.
I want to tell you about a new VS Code extension that I know about that maybe someone in chat made. It's called Theme Manager, and you can do... It just puts your theme and your font in the bottom bar, so people can see it when you're on stream.
Hold on, that would be great. I know there's one that you can let Twitch chat change your theme.
All one word. It's like it's do like the manager. Remove the M. Remove the second M. Sorry. Yeah.
Got it.
There we go.
Let's give it a go.
Does a thing, does it really well. Super simple.
Ah, there we go. Ooh, nice.
Oh, there it goes.
No. We're Gucci. Yeah. Does it hide it though when it's too big? That sucks.
Great. Well, great idea.
Terrible name.
Naming is hard. Well, naming is hard, and also yes. Like it checks all the boxes in my opinion. It does one thing and does it really well. And also shout out to Homie Coder. I don't know if he's still in the stream or not, but he was here earlier. But I know that's a thing he worked on. It was really cool.
If I turn off some of these, maybe it'll come on. I know what my end of line is.
You can also have it just pop up from time to time. Yeah. Like it has like a command palette thing. You can say show current theme, show current font.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, and this is basically just the Cascadia mono font, but with the additional glyphs for my terminal. There's not a spelling I would ever try. That's fair.
I would almost call it the manager, and that would the manager. That's.
But yeah, also thank you, Zuba, for reminding me about another one. If you're making content or just even showing people stuff, super pro tip: turn on screencast mode. So that's just a setting that like highlights your mouse clicky boy, and then if I type things, I can actually. Oh, it doesn't. I guess it's showing the letters as it comes up.
Screencast mode, right?
Yeah. But like you can also configure, does it show literally every letter or does it just show modifier keys? So highly
That's
configurable.
built-in, isn't it?
Yep. Sorry, I meant to say that's a built-in VS Code thing. I forgot to turn it on earlier. Thank you for reminding me.
But yeah, I like this with dev container though. Like, you can. The thing I'm a little concerned about is adding the features and them not adding the extensions. And I understand that why they did that. That way you can use it outside of VS Code as well. I just really wish that there was some way to like check, and maybe that's a good feature request of, hey, if you have a feature and there's an extension like a Microsoft, especially if there's like a Microsoft or a verified extension creator, it should just add the extension for you. Because otherwise, again, people are going to just go in and be like, oh, I added all these features and that's great. And then people go in to use them and they don't get the full benefit of it, like debugging and things like that, which, adding your extensions for like Bicep and for Azure or AWS, that's very helpful.
Yeah, I think I can understand from a design decision why they didn't, because the dev container spec works for outside of VS Code. So if you're adding a feature, I kind of understand why those would be decoupled, but having an additional way in VS Code, if you like as a selector for, because like it gives you suggested extensions, right? So what if it looked at the features and everything you have there and said, hey, would you like these extensions? That would be a nice, to your point, I think that would be a great workflow. Something else that might help with those who are frustrated with Docker, when you install the remote dev container thing, it gives you a bunch of different, you can like look through all of your different code spaces, which let's see if it'll just do it.
You should be. I think. Are they going to remove that language on there? Because it says CodeSpaces. I mean, it is a paid service. Probably, it must be enabled, but that's not true anymore.
Yeah. So I think
an issue. Hold on.
Yeah.
It goes into VS Code to immediately set this up, and then
got it.
Set it up.
Yeah. So you can see because this Remote Explorer is more than just CodeSpaces. There's also separately a CodeSpaces extension, which I think gives you a bunch of in VS Code options for creating a code space. So you can entirely in VS Code, you can create a code space, connect to it, and continue working locally. Because that's the other thing about CodeSpaces is you don't actually have to be in the browser. Your local VS Code can connect to it just as well as VS Code in your browser. So that's honestly how I usually use it, because I don't like mixing browser tabs.
Yeah.
So yeah, but with the Remote Explorer, I find that helpful when I'm having trouble with Docker and stuff. I can look at my dev containers and stuff. Stupefied Heisenberg. Oh, I love automatically generated names. And I think there's also, like a Docker specific one, like if you need to connect to different registries or blah, blah, more Docker-y things, but don't want to look at the Docker actual UI. Yeah. So yeah, those can help.
So this works for both dev containers and CodeSpaces, which is nice. If you have the resources, we're suggesting probably to use dev containers first because they're free, but they utilize your resources. CodeSpaces are free, but they're free-ish, free asterisk for the first. I can't remember if it's 60. It's 60 minutes, right? Not 60 hours. 60
no,
hours?
It's 60 hours. Yeah,
60 hours. Okay, so you get 60 hours of CodeSpace work, which. Sarah, how long does that take to go through?
I didn't run out because I was using too much of it. What happened was there was a bug since I was testing and demoing before, I had lots of code spaces spun up or created. And so when the service ticked over from just like free private preview to that, it just saw everything I had created still, because I didn't like delete them before it flipped. And then it was like, you've already like, it's gone.
No.
So they have since fixed this bug, but it does mean temporarily I am out of monies until I can get the appropriate internal credit cards hooked up. But
yeah.
Honestly,
Okay.
I think for a lot of folks, the free entitlements like will get you pretty far. And if you are using it for something closer to a daily driver, or like you're an org, like you can buy it through a GitHub Enterprise subscription, I think pretty reasonably. So
Next question, who does it charge? Like if I have a project and I have a dev container or code space set up for it and people are using it, is that their 60 hours or my 60 hours?
it's on an individual basis, so it's their 60 hours.
60 hours, okay.
I think you can, as an org, or like, I think it's an org owner. I'm not sure this would work on a personal repo, but if you have an organization, not necessarily GitHub Enterprise, but just a GitHub organization, you can like put in a credit card and set limits and say like, I am willing to pay for X number of hours of code spaces. And you can even scope it to like particular user groups. So if you have a group of core maintainers that you want to make sure they have a bunch of hours, but you don't want to make them pay for it themselves, like you can set up kind of a pool of resources that way for folks to use. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. But anyway,
All right.
thanks for indulging me. I figured. So, what do you think? Was this a pretty easy workflow? Like, obviously, I think the extension stuff is a very fair point.
I'm more eager to build in dev containers probably than I will code spaces, mostly because I'm still like exercising that muscle of contributing to other people's projects. I need to do that more. I'm still in the let's file issues for everything phase. But hey, 2 of my issues were resolved and PRs were merged yesterday. So when you next time you go build a diagram in Bicep using AZD or whatever, and you want to actually see your containers, those icons pop up now. So instead of just the generic resource icons. So yeah, I'm working on it. There's a whole other section that we could call like, let's be real about developer mental health things. Like there's a lot of that, not even imposter syndrome, but like other stuff involved.
Yeah.
This stream is brought to you by VS Code Pets.
I feel like I just gotta do this now. I just always have Chewy down in the corner. That's my dog.
Which one was the broken one?
Oh, I don't know.
Broken bit.
I don't think it's live, unfortunately. But
Oh well. Maybe in the future.
what's Zappy? I don't know what Zappy is. What is Zappy? Oh!
Oh.
It's the Power Apps logo.
So
I think.
us going into a VS Code tangent means that it's probably time to wrap this up. Sarah, you are on the Fediverse. I am not on the Fediverse. If people want to Fed with you, watch all your tooting going abouts. Like how would they do that?
I will change my display name, but it's the same handle I have everywhere, crazy4pi314 at mathstodon.xyz, because I'm a nerd like that. And I joined Mastodon like 4 years ago or whenever it started.
Because it is hard. Because naming is hard.
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't name it, but I also like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, find me there. or I think I'm pretty much anywhere else too.
Crazy for 5. And you can find me still on Twitter. Again, there is no opinion there. I just am lazy and I don't want to move again until I absolutely have to. You can find me on Twitter, but you can also check out a lot of the content stuff that is coming out of these streams on my YouTube channel, which if you go to youtube.com/KJAY Miller, that should work. And if it doesn't work, throw in the @ in front of the KJY Miller and that'll definitely work now. That's a new feature that I really like, is that you can get all that stuff. Now you can get a handle and you don't have to do too much. And shameless plug, every week except for this week, I do a podcast. If you like Python and Python things, I do a podcast called Python Community News. You can find it youtube.com/@PyCommunityNews. And we talk about all the things happening in the Python community that don't require pip install. So lots of board elections, lots of fundraisers right now, but be sure to check that out. We also have a newsletter, blog post, and all those good things. Sarah, I will talk with you next week, I guess.
Yep, time for lunch. Cheers.